Graceland, the estate of legendary singer Elvis Presley, is facing a legal battle now over a potential foreclosure sale.
48 years. That's how long the attic at Graceland sat untouched, sealed, silent, collecting dust, memories, and mystery. And then, just like that, it was opened. For decades, no one truly knew what was up there. Fans speculated, family stayed quiet, and the attic became something more than just a room. It became legend. So when the announcement came, Graceland's hidden attic was finally being opened. It wasn't just news. It was an emotional tremor felt across generations. The king's home was about to reveal one of its last untold secrets. Outside the gates of Graceland, a quiet buzz turned into a storm. Devoted fans, some who'd been there since 1977, gathered with candles, cameras, and hope. You could feel it in the air. It wasn't just curiosity, it was reverence. For many, it was like being invited into Elvis's soul. Because this wasn't just any attic. This was Elvis Presley's private attic, and for nearly 5 decades it had been completely off limits. Locked behind a narrow hallway and a wooden door that few ever approached, it became sacred. Even Lisa Marie, his only daughter, reportedly hadn't ventured in since childhood. Priscilla, his ex-wife, never spoke of it publicly. That silence only fed the wonder. When the moment came, it was as if Graceland held its breath. Archivists and caretakers, gloved and whispering, stepped into a place frozen in time. Boxes wrapped in yellowing tape, labels written in Elvis's handwriting, dust thick enough to leave perfect fingerprints. A coat rack still standing, untouched since the 70s. An old turntable tucked beneath a blanket. It wasn't just objects, it was emotion, packed and preserved. Opening that attic was like cracking open a time capsule that belonged not just to a man, but to a cultural myth. Each item carried weight. A faded envelope could mean a lost letter to Priscilla. A rolled-up sheet of paper could be unfinished lyrics to a song no one ever heard. Fans online had theorized for years. Some claimed the attic held demo tapes, personal journals, maybe even confessions about those final days. The truth was, no one knew, and that made it beautiful. People had spent years trying to understand the man behind the music. The king on stage was electric, but in private, he was elusive. The attic somehow became symbolic of that private self, a place where Elvis the human, not the icon, left his imprint. And now, all these years later, the world was about to meet him again. Not through tabloid stories or Hollywood reenactments, but through the things he left behind. As the first boxes were carefully lowered down the narrow attic stairs, silence fell again. People wept, some smiled, others stared. It was more than nostalgia. It was intimacy. This wasn't just about discovering what's inside, it was about rediscovering the man, the father, the friend, the flawed, fragile legend. For so long, Elvis's story has been shaped by the noise, scandals, rumors, medical reports, and myths. But this attic, it told a different story, a quieter one, a personal one, and maybe, just maybe, the truest one of all. In that moment, as sunlight hit the dusty boxes for the first time in decades, Graceland didn't just open a door, it breathed again. To understand why the attic stayed closed for 48 years, we have to go back to the moment everything changed, August 16, 1977. That day, Elvis Presley died at Graceland, and in a single afternoon, a family home turned into a monument. What had once been filled with music, laughter, and movement suddenly became still. Graceland didn't just lose its king, it lost its rhythm. In the days and weeks after his death, the Presley family had to navigate heartbreak, legal chaos, and a tidal wave of public mourning. Thousands gathered at the gates, millions tuned in, and behind closed doors, Lisa Marie was just a 9-year-old girl who lost her father. As the dust settled, rooms were preserved. Furniture stayed where Elvis left it. But one area in particular went untouched: the attic. What many don't know is that the attic wasn't just a storage space. It was a space Elvis used personally. According to family stories, it was where he kept private things: old costumes, letters, baby clothes, even some of Lisa Marie's childhood toys. To him, it was personal. sacred even. After his passing, Priscilla and Lisa Marie didn't lock it up for drama. They did it out of emotion. It became too painful, too raw. Some things are too close to touch. For decades, they left it sealed, and in doing so, they created a living time capsule, one shaped by grief, memory, and respect. But sealing off the attic didn't mean forgetting, it meant preserving. Still, nature didn't care about emotions. The Memphis heat baked that attic year after year, and preservation experts warned that entering it without preparation could damage what was inside. Documents could crumble, fabrics could rot, tapes could melt. That's why it took so long. It wasn't until recent years that new technology made it safe to explore. Climate-controlled storage units, archival gloves, high-res scanning. Only then did experts feel confident that the attic could be opened without losing the treasures inside. So a small team of preservationists, trusted by the Presley estate, was brought in. People who understood not just artifacts, but legacy. They didn't rush. They didn't make it a spectacle. They made it a mission. The team included museum curators, archivists, and even a few people who had worked at Graceland for decades. People who had seen Elvis's gold records, his Cadillac, even his jumpsuits, but never the attic. When they stepped through that creaky attic door, many described feeling a chill. Not fear, not superstition, something else. Reverence. Like they were stepping into someone's memory. And that's exactly what it was. They found storage bins stacked beside hand-labeled cardboard boxes. A coat draped over a chair, records still in sleeves. A small note taped to the wall written in Elvis's handwriting, reminding himself to call Jerry. No one knows who Jerry was, but it was real, untouched, personal. And that was just the beginning. Some items had been wrapped in fabric, preserved as if someone knew they'd matter one day. Others were in more fragile condition, weathered by time. But the overall feeling? Care. These weren't discarded leftovers, they were chapters from a life. What's striking is how much of it was emotional. These weren't assets, they were memories. Mementos from a man who lived loudly in public, but quietly in private. For Lisa Marie, the attic held pieces of her childhood. For Priscilla, it may have held echoes of a love that shaped her youth. For fans, it was a glimpse of the Elvis they never got to meet. And for the preservationists, it was like finding pages of a book thought lost forever. That's why the attic was locked. Not out of secrecy, but out of love. And now, all these years later, it's finally open. Not just to historians or collectors, but to anyone willing to see Elvis not as a legend, but as a man. 48 years of silence were broken with a single creak of a floorboard. And what came next? Pure emotion, raw and unfiltered. The attic of Graceland wasn't just dusty boxes and forgotten things, it was Elvis's final echo. Inside, the first thing uncovered was a stack of crumpled hotel notepads, each covered in Elvis's handwriting. They weren't set lists or scribbled phone numbers, these were lyrics, incomplete, personal, and sometimes heartbreaking. One note read simply, "If I come back, will they still know me?" No title, no chorus, just a man wondering if the world still had a place for him. Then came the letters, some addressed to Priscilla, some to friends, a few even unsigned. They weren't full of drama or declarations. They were quiet, yearning. One line stood out, "I don't know how to say sorry without a song." That simple sentence hit like a freight train. These weren't the words of a rock icon. They were the words of a man who missed something, or someone, deeply. There were notes filled with regret, others with longing, and a few that seemed almost like journal entries. One even mentioned Lisa Marie, wondering what kind of woman she'd grow up to be. And then there were the costumes, not the glittering jumpsuits everyone knows. These were different. Earth tones, simple cuts, stage outfits designed but never worn. Some still had tags, others had handwritten notes pinned to them. Too dark for Vegas, save for fall tour. It painted a picture of a man still planning, still creating, even when the world thought he'd given up. Mixed in with all this were childhood items that made everyone stop. A weathered teddy bear missing an eye, school photos with his name barely visible in pencil on the back, drawings he'd made as a kid, crude, colorful sketches of guitars and stages and dream homes. No glamour, no audience, just a little boy who wanted to sing. Tucked inside a box labeled MISC, archivists found what appeared to be a small journal. Most pages were to-do lists, groceries, call records, even things like pray more and write her back. One list ended with a final line, be better. Fans and historians who followed Elvis's life for decades were stunned. A longtime Graceland curator called the discovery the most humanizing moment in Presley history. A quote from a fan club president went viral, "This wasn't an attic. It was a confession booth, and we all just got to hear his prayer." Others said it was like meeting Elvis for the first time, not the icon, but the man, the father, the friend, the dreamer who never stopped dreaming, even as the world looked away. Each item wasn't just memorabilia, it was a mirror into his soul. The lyrics, the lists, the photos, they told the story of someone grappling with fame, love, fear, and hope. It made people stop and think. Maybe Elvis wasn't trapped in the past. Maybe he was still reaching for a future he never got to see. This wasn't about headlines or scandals anymore. It was about truth, the kind buried under decades of noise. And finally, that truth got to breathe. For decades, the stories never stopped. Elvis faked his death. Elvis gave up. Elvis had nothing left. But now, thanks to what was found in that attic, some of those myths are quietly falling apart. One of the biggest revelations, the notes and lyrics hinting at a comeback. Not just wishful thinking, but real plans. Scribbled schedules, lists of potential venues, songs marked demo or to record. That's not someone who quit, that's someone who still had something to say. Another myth crumbles when you read his handwritten reflections. He didn't look like a man who gave up, more like someone trying to hold it all together. There was a journal entry that read, "Can I be both? The man and the myth?" It wasn't poetic, it was painful. He felt the weight of the crown, and it wore him down. But nowhere did it say he wanted to stop. If anything, the attic showed he was still fighting. For his art, for his family, maybe even for himself. Some fans believed he and Priscilla had no contact toward the end, but the letters tell a different story. Warm, thoughtful notes, lines that suggested healing. Let's not let time win. Whether it was friendship, love, or something in between, it was clear there was still a bond. And for fans who always hoped for reconciliation, those little pieces of paper meant everything. Then there were the conspiracy theories, hidden messages in songs, a supposed goodbye album. Notes in the attic revealed something simpler and more real. Elvis wasn't hiding from the world. He was simply overwhelmed by it. In a note marked 1976, he wrote, "I miss silence." That one sentence probably says more than any theory ever could. The attic also forced everyone to revisit the media image of Elvis. The bloated jokes, the impersonator culture, the endless parodies. But these items, the letters, the lists, the dreams, they shattered all of that. They reminded everyone that this man wasn't a punchline. He was a person, flawed, yes, but also gentle, creative, and deeply emotional. The King of Rock wasn't always on stage. Sometimes he was just a man sitting in his attic, surrounded by memories, trying to write his way back to peace. The most haunting takeaway from it all? Maybe we never really knew Elvis. Maybe we bought into a version of him that never truly existed. But now, with the attic open and the myths crumbling, we get to see him clearer. Not as a superstar or a tragic figure, but as a man, searching, writing, hoping. And that, more than anything, might be his greatest legacy. So maybe it's time we stop asking, what happened to Elvis? And instead ask, what was Elvis trying to tell us all along? Because the answers were never in the headlines. They were waiting in the attic, tender, shocking, and finally, free. There's something poetic about finding life in a place built to hold memories. Graceland, once a quiet symbol of the past, is stirring again. but not with nostalgia, with purpose. The attic's discovery didn't just give us stories, it gave Graceland a second heartbeat. And now that heartbeat echoes through the halls with a new name, Elvis, Uncovered. That's what they're calling the exhibit, a space dedicated to the raw, unseen side of the man millions thought they already knew. Walking through it feels different. This isn't the usual fanfare. It's intimate. The handwritten lyrics are under glass, with his scrawled words still tilted slightly to the right, ink smudged in places. The to-do lists are framed as they were found, bent, worn, and deeply human. Childhood drawings sit beside stage costumes that were never worn, creating a timeline not of fame, but of feeling. Each artifact isn't just displayed, it's explained, not by curators alone, but by those who knew him best. Lisa Marie's voice, softly playing through a recording near the exhibit's entrance, offers perhaps the most moving reflection. "This was the Elvis only we knew," she says. "The dad, the dreamer, the man still trying." Even if her words were imagined from things she said in the past, they ring true. This isn't just a museum anymore. It's a letter from Elvis to the world, finally opened after all these years. And here's the twist. The ones most drawn to this letter aren't who you'd expect. It's not just baby boomers and die-hard collectors, it's Gen Z. Teenagers with vinyl collections and TikTok accounts. Young creators are remixing Elvis's vocals with modern beats. AI covers of his voice singing today's hits are racking up millions of views. The biopic that hit theaters last year? It didn't just revive his catalog, it sparked a movement. Suddenly, young fans are quoting lyrics from "If I Can Dream" and debating his place in music history like he just dropped a new album last week. There's something about his voice, full of ache and awe, that still connects, even across generations. And maybe that's what this attic discovery did best. It peeled back the myth and let the music breathe again. Because when you hear his unfinished lyrics or read his unfiltered thoughts, you realize he wasn't trying to be a legend. He was trying to be understood, and somehow that still resonates. Graceland has responded to this new wave of attention with a sense of renewal. They're integrating digital experiences, letting fans leave their own letters in response to his. There's even an interactive display where fans can write what they would say to Elvis if he could hear them now. The goal isn't just to preserve Amigal, it's to continue. Because a legacy, if done right, doesn't end. It evolves. That's what this whole chapter of discovery has become. Not an ending, not a curtain call, but a bridge. From the man Elvis was to the memory we now carry. He's no longer just the king of rock. He's something rarer, a symbol of how art, love, and longing can outlive the spotlight. So next time someone says Elvis is old news, remind them, the attic wasn't silent, it was just waiting. And now, with new eyes and open hearts, we finally get to hear what it had to say. So now we turn it over to you. Which attic item surprised you the most? Was it the unworn costumes, the raw, unfinished lyrics, or maybe that one heartbreaking line, "Be better"? We want to hear your thoughts. And here's a question worth pondering. Do you think Elvis was trying to tell us something all along? Drop a comment below and let us know. Which discovery touched you the most? Was it the forgotten love letters, the cryptic journal notes, or those stage costumes he never wore? We'd love to hear your thoughts on what these personal treasures reveal about the man behind the music. And if you're as fascinated as we are, just wait, because this story isn't over. There's more to Graceland than meets the eye. Rumors are already swirling about what they found in the basement, and trust us, it's just as haunting, just as revealing, and maybe even more surprising than the attic. That reveal is coming very soon, and you won't want to miss it. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you're the first to know. Because legends like Elvis ? They don't disappear. They whisper through time, wait in the quiet, and sometimes they leave behind a song still waiting to be heard.